I stood in the middle of my wedding surrounded by sparkling lights, the clinking of wine glasses, and hundreds of well wishes, yet tears streamed down my cheeks as I heard my mother-in-law's voice shouting above the crowd. "You don't belong in this family. Get out now." She thought I was just a poor girl from Africa who had climbed her way into marrying her son, the sole heir to one of the oldest aristocratic dynasties in Provence. But just minutes later, when a private jet streaked across the sky and landed in the field behind the reception, her face turned ghostly white. The entire scene split in half by the sharp roar of engines and the truth that had been buried for years, finally breaking free. But before I tell you what happened next, you need to know how this story began. They say your wedding day is the happiest day of your life. And honestly, that morning, I believed it. I stood before an antique mirror in the bridal suite, with early sunlight streaming through the cream-colored lace curtains. I gently adjusted the single pearl necklace left to me by my grandmother, the woman who taught me that dignity is the one thing no one can take from you if you hold on to it tightly enough. The wedding dress I wore wasn't designer. It had no crystals, no dramatic tulle like Parisian heiresses. It was simple, elegant, and true to who I am, a woman born of the red soil of Senegal, raised in the alleys of Casablanca, and who built her future with her own hands. I chose humility over extravagance, silence over bragging. That may be my first mistake. I met Mathieu Lefebvre at HEC Paris, France's most prestigious business school. We both majored in international finance. He came from a traditional French family, old nobility, owners of vineyards and estates across the South. I came from a place where dreaming too big was already seen as arrogance. But we were both dreamers. We spent countless nights in the library talking about markets, startups, and the days when the world would know our names. Mathieu used to joke that we would rule Europe together. What he didn't know was that while he was learning to read balance sheets, I was quietly writing code. While he thought I was studying for the GMAT, I was calling angel investors in Dubai. While he slept after networking events, I stayed up all night designing the UI for what would later become one of France and Belgium's most popular personal finance platforms. I kept it from him not out of mistrust, but to be sure that he loved me for who I was, not for the numbers in my bank account or the equity clauses in my startup. Mathieu loved the girl who ate a €5 pizza in the library, wore old sweaters from the flea market, and always said, "I'm just good at managing money." He never questioned how I could afford last-minute weekend trips to Corsica or why I always had the newest phone. He just thought I was good at budgeting. He was sweet and straightforward. But love is never that simple, especially when your mother-in-law is Vivienne Lefebvre. From the very first time I visited their estate in Aix-en-Provence during our third year of university, Madame Vivienne looked at me like I had stained her pure white tablecloth. She was polite. The old money kind of polite. Soft voice, delicate smile, razor-sharp eyes, and questions that cut like blades. "What does your family do in Morocco? Your father's a French teacher? Education is noble, though not very lucrative, is it? So, what are your plans after graduation? Go back and serve your community?" I was used to the way Western society treats women like me, smiles on their lips, contempt in their eyes. But women of color like me, we learn early how to read between the lines. We know when we're being judged, even if no one says it out loud. Mathieu always defended me after each encounter. "She just needs time. She's not used to outsiders." Year after year, I sent her birthday cards, but there was never a reply. I gifted rare books every Christmas, not a single thank you. At dinner parties, she still introduced me as Mathieu's classmate, even after he proposed to me on top of Montmartre. I thought loving Mathieu would be enough, and that love meant accepting everything. I believed the wedding would be a turning point. When she saw me in a wedding dress, she would understand that love doesn't care about nationality, race, or wealth. I hoped, and that hope made what came next all the more cruel. The wedding began like a dream. The vineyards of Domaine de Lumière are bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. The lavender fields in the distance still carried a faint purple scent in the breeze. Guests from Paris, Geneva, Milan, all elegantly dressed, sipping golden champagne, smiling. I walked among them like an actual princess, though deep down, I carried a vague, gnawing sense that something wasn't right. When I stepped into the aisle between two ancient olive trees, all eyes turned to me. But my eyes searched for only one person, my father, in his navy blue suit that he had saved up for half a year to tailor in Casablanca. My mother sat in the front row, her hands trembling as she dabbed tears away with a handkerchief I had hand-embroidered in gold thread. The word peace in Wolof. Mathieu cried. He genuinely cried as I walked toward him beneath the white floral arch. For those 30 minutes, everything was perfect. Even Vivienne, my future mother-in-law, smiled through the entire ceremony. But I knew that smile wasn't from the heart. It was part of the social mask she had worn for far too long. The reception occurred on a terrace paved with old stones, where strands of warm yellow light stretched across the sky like a glowing galaxy. I moved from group to group, thanking each guest, toasting with them, smiling, until I happened to pass the small bar at the corner of the courtyard, and I heard it. Vivienne's voice, gentle, but cold as steel, sliced through the air just as I stepped back. That girl. I still don't understand why Mathieu is so obsessed with her. It's obvious she's after the family fortune. An older woman whom I would later learn was Mathieu's aunt nodded slowly. At least they signed a prenup, right? No. Vivienne smirked. She convinced him not to. She's very good at this whole pure love act. The boy is too blind to see he's being manipulated. I stood there, as if stabbed in the back. My hand gripped the wine glass tightly, but my face held its smile. My mother's words echoed in my mind. Don't fight with words. Let your accomplishments speak for you. I turned and walked away as if I had heard nothing. It wasn't the first time I'd been looked down on, but on my wedding day, at the very venue I paid for, in front of friends I had flown in from around the world. I had intended to stay silent, to let it go, but prejudice, it never stops just because you do. It grows bolder every time you bow your head, and I saw that truth unfold right at dinner. Vivienne stood up, holding the microphone from the live band. She said she wanted to share a few heartfelt words. Everyone set their forks down. The violin music stopped. I looked at Mathieu. He frowned slightly, perhaps sensing something, but said nothing. Vivienne began in a voice sweet as honey. I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate. My son, Mathieu, has always been a young man of ideals, intelligence, and was raised to pursue great things. I could feel the pauses between her words, each one a dagger aimed at me. And now, he has chosen a life partner. I hope, she looked directly at me, that the love is real, that it does not come from other ambitions. Because I've always believed, money should not be something one receives through marriage, but something one earns on their own. No one said a word. 200 guests sat frozen. The wind slipped through the beams above as if the universe, too, was holding its breath. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. Mathieu's eyes dropped to his plate. He squeezed my hand but said nothing. I stood. Every eye turned to me. My hand trembled slightly, but my voice did not. Thank you, Vivienne, for your heartfelt words. I believe we all hope for a genuine love, where one is seen for their heart, not for their wallet. Applause followed, weak and awkward. The evening went on, but something had shattered, and I could feel it clearly. This was no longer a wedding. It had become a stage, where I was being forced to play the role of the outsider. The evening went on, but no one truly enjoyed their meal. Whispers floated from table to table like smoke. I kept smiling, nodding, and thanking each guest as if nothing had happened. But inside me a storm raged. Vivienne, that woman with her graceful facade, had just drawn a dagger across the dinner table and plunged it straight into my dignity. In front of family, friends, business partners, even someone who had signed an investment deal with me last year, she declared that I was unworthy. I had once believed that if I held on to my dignity, I could withstand any insult. But that was before Vivienne poured her fourth glass of champagne and turned herself into a storm set on destroying everything in its path. I was standing by the dessert table when she approached, glass in hand, eyes bloodshot from the alcohol. A faint trace of Chanel number 5 lingered around her, but it couldn't cover the bitter scent of malice. You think you're clever, don't you? She began in a sharp whisper, playing the sweet, innocent girl. But I know exactly what kind of woman you are. I clenched my glass, steadying my hand to keep it from trembling. Patricia, this isn't the time, I said calmly. Don't you dare lecture me. I know you planned this from the start. I bet you Googled our family name before agreeing to date Mathieu. Women like you from nowhere only know one way to climb, seduction. I took half a step back, intending to walk away. But she blocked my path. Her eyes were wild. Her lips were trembling, whether from wine or hate. I couldn't tell. Do you know how much my son is worth? Do you think you deserve to be in this family? No. You're just an opportunist wrapped in cheap elegance. And I will not let you destroy my son. A camera flash went off. I noticed a young couple at a nearby table recording with their phones. Other guests had stopped eating. Eyes turned toward us. The band went silent. You need to calm down, I said. Surprisingly composed. Calm down? Calm down? Vivian shouted, sloshing champagne onto the floor. This is my son's wedding, not some circus. You brainwashed him, made him refuse a prenup, whispered your fake little love stories. What do you want? Everything we own? Matthew rushed over, face pale, panic in his voice. Mom, what are you doing? You're drunk. Please stop, please don't. Vivian pushed his hand away, then pointed at me with a finger that sliced like a knife. You don't belong in this family. You are not one of us. Get out. Now. I heard a collective gasp ripple through the crowd. My mother stood abruptly, tears streaming down her face. My uncle, Uncle Umar, stepped forward, his face hard with anger, ready to intervene. But I raised a hand to stop him. Excuse me. I said, my voice low but steady, ringing clear. Did you just ask me to leave my wedding? I'll have security escort you out. Vivian barked, turning to the startled staff standing nearby. Get that woman out of here. This isn't a wedding anymore. This is a scam. The humiliation was real. Right there, in the wedding I paid for entirely. In the dress I chose. In front of guests I invited from all over the world, I was being thrown out. By the mother of the groom. For nothing more than the color of my skin, the origin of my name, and the bias that no one ever dares to name aloud. Matthew stood there, saying nothing, doing nothing, not defending me. I looked at him. I looked at the people around us, and in that instant, I knew. It was time to stop playing the role of the enduring bride. I walked away from the wedding reception, my dress trailing across the stone floor, each step echoing like the calm before a rising storm. My hand slipped under the lace, reaching into the hidden pocket sewn into the lining of my gown. I pulled out my phone. Soleiman, it's me. I know it's the wedding day, but I need you to send the jet to Provence. Right now. Same coordinates as before. The eastern field, just beyond the vineyard. How long? Good. The call ended. I inhaled deeply. Above me, the stars over Provence seemed to listen in silence. When I returned to the terrace, no one had left. Vivienne was still speaking loudly to a group of guests from Bordeaux, repeating the exact words: opportunist, deceived family, threatened assets. Matthew stood not far away, his face pale, as if watching his mother self-destruct and unable to find shelter from the blast. I walked straight to the center of the terrace, where the DJ still held the microphone in stunned silence. I extended my hand gently. May I borrow the mic for a moment? The DJ handed it to me without question, out of habit or instinct. I turned around to face the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I need a few minutes of your time. No one objected. A few stood up. Phones were raised again, ready to capture the next chapter of this unfolding drama. I didn't care. I want to thank all of you for being here today and sharing this important milestone with Matthew and me. I am truly grateful. However, it seems there are a few misunderstandings about who I am and why I'm here. I turned to Vivienne. She stood with her arms folded, eyes dripping with disdain. Oh, here comes the victim speech, she muttered, loud enough for 3 guests nearby to hear. I ignored her. Vivienne, you said I married your son for money, that I'm an opportunist, a gold digger, that I don't belong in your family. Finally, some honesty, she sneered. I lifted my head. My eyes locked directly with hers. There's something you don't know about me. And perhaps it's time I shared it. A low, steady rumble began to hum in the distant sky. Guests looked around. Some tilted their heads upward. The wind picked up slightly. A faint scent of jet fuel drifted in the night air. During university, I founded a small startup, an app to help students manage their finances. It caught the attention of an investment firm in Dubai. Then 2 more, from Zurich and Singapore. We expanded and acquired 3 regional competitors. After graduation, I continued to grow the company quietly. The engine roar grew louder. Glasses on the tables began to tremble softly. By the time Matthew and I got engaged, my company was valued at 50 million euros. Today, it's worth more than 4 times that. I paused. Every eye turned toward the black sky beyond the vineyard. You once asked me why I came here. So here is my answer. I came because I love your son, not for your money. And more precisely, the Gulfstream G700 sliced across the horizon, its landing lights blazing. It soared above the skies of Provence like a steel comet, then gradually descended, aiming directly for the open field just beyond the vineyard. The crowd erupted. Dozens of phones were raised at once. Shock rippled through the entire space. Vivienne stood frozen. That jet, I said, slowly and clearly, is mine. The silver-white Gulfstream G700 landed on the field behind the wedding reception, its wheels brushing over the dry grass. The engines roared, then slowly faded until they fell almost entirely silent. The air stood still, broken only by the clicks of cameras and the hum of vibrating phones as live streams started to roll. I still held the microphone. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't angry. I didn't need to be. I never told Matthew about any of this. I didn't need him to know the size of my fortune to love me. What I needed was to see if he could love a woman like me, a woman of color, with no noble last name, no ancestral chateau. I needed to know if our love was real when stripped of wealth, title, and privilege. Vivienne turned to me, her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. I never told his family either, because I wanted them to see my heart, the way I treated Matthew, the love I gave him, not the numbers in my bank account. A breeze carried the sharp scent of jet fuel and a chill of humiliation. But tonight, I was asked to leave my wedding. I was called a gold digger, a fraud. I was publicly humiliated, pulled out of a celebration I planned, paid for, and spent months organizing. I turned, facing Vivienne directly. The irony here, Vivienne, is that if anyone married for money, it wasn't me. It was your son. Murmurs rippled through the guests, but I didn't stop. That jet? It's one of 3 I own. I have a penthouse in Dubai, a private villa in the Seychelles, and a chain of boutique hotels currently running in Lisbon. My company now employs over 200 staff across 7 countries. I'm a strategic shareholder in a digital bank in Berlin, and I recently turned down an investment offer from a Qatari fund so I could give my whole heart to this day. Vivienne didn't move. Her hands trembled. Her face had gone ghostly pale, drained of all color. So when you called me a gold digger, that was almost laughable, because you had no idea that your family, as wealthy as it may be, has never even come close to what I've built with my 2 hands. The silence now was no longer suffocating. It was recognition, the sound of prejudice collapsing in real time, the stillness that happens when power shifts hands. I stayed silent for 5 years. I endured the stares, the words, the quiet exclusions. But I never forgot this. I don't need anyone's permission to exist. I am living proof of what resilience looks like, and of what people once told me was impossible. I stepped off the terrace. No one stopped me. The plane's staircase had already lowered. My pilot, Soleiman, waited in his crisp black uniform at the bottom, holding my small suitcase. I paused, turned back once more. I looked at the microphone in my hand. And Madame Lefebvre, I didn't come here to ask for your acceptance. I came here to get married. But if you think I will stay silent ever again, that will be your final mistake. I placed the microphone down on the DJ's table. The dry click echoed through the terrace like a complete stop. I walked toward the plane, striding between the banquet tables where every guest had now risen to their feet. Their eyes followed me not because of the white wedding gown, but because of the presence of a woman who had decided never to accept humiliation again, not even on her wedding day, and not from the family of the man she loved. Behind me, I heard hurried footsteps. Mathieu. Aliyah, he called out, breathless. Wait. I turned. He was running toward me, sweat on his brow, his eyes clouded with confusion and disappointment. But deep within, something else. On awakening. Is it true? You own all of that? I nodded slowly. 3 jets. A penthouse in Dubai. 6 properties. A company valued at over 200 million euros. And a long line of people who once believed I wasn't worthy, just because I wasn't born in a marble chateau, but in a cramped apartment in Casablanca. He swallowed hard, as if trying to choke down his pride. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at him, long and steady, because I needed to know. When the world turns against me, Would you stand with me? And today, when your mother called security, when she humiliated me, when I was thrown out of my wedding, you said nothing. He dropped his gaze. The guests no longer pretended not to listen. They stood still, phones lowered, holding their breath. They knew this was no longer a wedding. This was a public reckoning, a trial of love and honor. I don't need unconditional protection, I continued. My voice is calm but firm. I just need a husband who can look injustice in the eye and not look away. Matthew clenched his fists, his eyes searching mine as if seeing me truly for the first time. Then he turned, faced his mother, standing stiffly just a few feet away, her face pale, her eyes red. Mother. Vivienne trembled, her lips pressed tight. You need to apologize. Right here, in front of everyone. Matthew. I was only, no only. What you did today was unacceptable. It was disgraceful. It was wrong. The air turned still. The olive trees held their breath. The wine glasses stood frozen. The jet was still waiting, stairs lowered. The pilot stood silent and straight. You insulted the woman I love, a woman who hid an empire just to be loved purely, and you almost made me lose her. Forever. Vivienne Quiver. Then finally, as if her entire world collapsed inward, she whispered, I'm sorry. Mathieu didn't blink. Louder, and mean it. She looked at me, and for the first time, there was no pride in her eyes. Only shame and regret. I'm sorry, Aaliyah. I was completely wrong. I let prejudice cloud my judgment. I've treated you terribly over the years, and I have no excuse. I'm genuinely sorry. I said nothing. Her words fell to the ground like shattered glass. Not to be picked up, but to lift the weight off my chest. Not because I needed her forgiveness, but because I knew I had won. Not with money, not with power, but with truth and an unbreakable pride. Matthew turned back to me. He stepped closer. Then quietly, he knelt on one knee. I'm sorry for not speaking up, for letting you bear it alone, for letting my love be drowned in cowardly silence. I looked at him, the man I loved, flawed, but learning to stand tall. He reached for my hand. Give me a chance to begin again. From now on, it's you and me. And if we must, then it's us against the world. I looked at the jet, then back at him. I said nothing, just nodded, softly, but enough to save what was worth saving. I looked at Matthew. The man was still kneeling under the warm glow of string lights, his silver cravat slightly askew from running. He held my hand tightly, like someone clinging to something he refused to lose again. I nodded. All right. We'll move forward together. But there's one thing, Matthew. I will never again live in the shadow of silence. I need to know if someone disrespects me. You'll be the first to stand up, not the one standing behind. I promise, he said, his voice no longer trembling but firm. I've been silent long enough. From now on, my voice will be your wall. A slow ripple of applause echoed from behind us. The guests, initially stunned, were now fully captivated by a story that had grown far beyond a wedding. Some were crying. Some, especially the older ones, bowed their heads, as if they had just looked into a mirror that didn't flatter. I turned to Vivienne, who stood quietly beside the dessert table. There was no venom in her eyes now, only the exhaustion of someone who had just realized she might have lost her only son to the quiet arrogance of her prejudice. You apologized, I said, and I acknowledge that. But an apology is not the end. It's only the beginning. Forgiveness must be earned through action, not words. She nodded, eyes red, voice cracking. You understand? I'll try. If you give me the chance to honestly know you, not through financial statements, but through the heart of a woman whom I've been completely wrong about. I paused for a moment, then nodded gently. I won't close the door, but I'm not the one who needs to step back. You'll need to step forward. Vivienne began to cry, no longer the harsh matriarch, but simply a mother, broken and trying to learn how to mend. Matthew squeezed my hand again, and I knew something had changed irrevocably. In that moment, I was no longer the outsider, not because I'd been invited in, but because I had walked in with my head high and my honor intact. The sound of jet engines returned, but now, it was no longer a threat. It was an invitation, a promise of freedom. The pilot gave a signal, The aircraft was ready. I turned to Matthew and smiled. So, ready to start our honeymoon? Monsieur Lefebvre? He raised an eyebrow. Are you serious? Where are we going? I smiled, pulling a cream-colored envelope from the hidden pocket in my wedding gown. It was embossed with the words, Hôtel Georges D. Paris, Suite Impériale. Booked 3 months ago. The most beautiful honeymoon suite in Paris. Just in case. Our wedding had a few social disruptions. He burst into laughter, then lifted me into his arms. Just as the terrace erupted into thunderous applause, Matthew carried me in his arms across the stone terrace, down the narrow path toward the open field, where the Gulfstream G700 waited. Under the soft glow of the aircraft's lights, it all looked like a scene from a film. This time, I was no longer the supporting character in someone else's story. I turned back one last time. Vivienne was still standing there, alone. Her eyes glistened not with rage, but with something I had never seen in her before. Genuine remorse. Aaliyah, she called softly. Wait. I placed my hand gently on Matthew's shoulder, signaling him to stop. I turned and took a few steps toward her. I'm genuinely sorry. I know I ruined everything. I don't expect forgiveness right away. But I hope that one day, you might let me get to know the real you, the woman who makes my son so happy in ways I never understood. I looked at her, not as the woman who had humiliated me, but as a human being, one slowly dismantling the false beliefs she'd built her life upon. Forgiveness, I said, isn't something given for free. It has to be earned by choosing to do what's right. Even if it's late, it's still right. Vivienne nodded, her eyes filled with tears. For the first time, she didn't try to justify herself. She didn't wear the cold grace of the upper class. She was simply a mother, trying, perhaps for the first time, to become a better person. I turned back toward the plane. The white steps leading up to the jet felt like a staircase into another chapter. From victim to victor. From outsider to master of my fate. As I reached the top step, applause broke out again behind me. Not applause for a perfect wedding, not for a beautiful bride, but for a woman who had stood tall in the face of cruelty and made the world bow to her calm, undeniable truth. Inside the jet, the air was cool. Soft amber light bathed the Italian leather interior. I sank into the seat, finally safe. After a day when cruelty had been dressed in flowers, champagne, and ceremony, Matthew sat beside me, still a bit dazed. Is there anything else you've been hiding? He asked, eyes wide. Because honestly, I feel like I just married a secret queen. I smiled, pulling a silver envelope from my handbag. Just a little wedding gift. What now? He whispered. A vineyard. In Tuscany. He figured, if we ever feel like it, we could host a real wedding. You know, one better than the last. He laughed out loud, clutching his head. You are the greatest surprise of my life. And from now on, I whispered, no more secrets. No more silence. No more shrinking. Just truth. And love. The plane began to taxi. Through the window I saw Vivienne still standing alone, among the rows of now empty wedding tables. Not disgraced, but stripped bare. Facing herself, for the first time, without a mask. He no longer felt anger toward her, only compassion. For those who live their entire lives in fear of recognizing someone else's worth, somehow diminishes their own. But the truth is, worth can't be taken. It can only be awakened when we're brave enough to let go of our prejudice. The Gulfstream sliced through the night sky over Provence, its wing lights flickering like drops of gold falling to the earth. Inside the cabin, the engine hummed softly, champagne-filled crystal glasses. And he sat still, not because I was holding back, but because for the first time in hours, I was truly at peace. I thought back on it all. 5 years trying to step into a family that never opened its doors. 5 years of sending gifts, swallowing pride, smiling, hoping. 5 years believing that if I were good enough, polite enough, accomplished, sufficient, I would be accepted. But the problem was never that I wasn't good enough. The problem was that I didn't fit the mold they wanted me to become. I am a woman of color. I wasn't born in Paris. My last name isn't Leclerc or Darcy. I didn't arrive with empty hands. I arrived with a mind, a set of values, and a world I built with 2 hands. And that's why they saw me as a threat. They weren't afraid because I was poor. They were afraid because I didn't need them to become wealthy. What people fear most isn't dependence. It's independence. I thought about the girls who came before me. The ones who entered rooms where scrutiny came before greetings. The ones who were asked, "What do your parents do?" instead of, "What are your dreams?" The ones whose worth was measured not by achievements, but by skin tone and passport origin. I thought about the times I walked into European tech summits and was mistaken for an assistant. Asked, "Where's your CEO?" And the look on their faces when I said, "I am." I remembered the day I ordered caviar at a restaurant in Geneva, and the waiter asked me, "Are you sure? That one's rather expensive." I didn't reply. I just handed him a black credit card. But none of that ever made me cry. What made me cry today? It was when the man I loved stood beside me that it truly mattered. Even if late, even if clumsy, he chose right. Real love doesn't protect you from the world. It stands between you and the world when it must. I turned to look at Mathieu. He was staring at me like he saw me for the first time. Not the girl in an old sweater in the university library. Not the one who budgeted well. But Aliana Dione, CEO, founder, the woman who stood before hundreds of people and reclaimed her dignity with nothing but her presence and truth. He reached out and took my hand. "You know," he said softly, "you just taught us a lesson no school ever could." I smiled. I wasn't trying to teach. I was living truthfully. And today, I lived truthfully louder than ever. I pulled out my phone. Hundreds of notifications. Someone had live-streamed the entire scene. The hashtag, "The Jet Bride," was starting to trend. Comments were flooding in. So much respect. She's not just a bride, she's a symbol. I am Aaliyah in my wedding too. But I didn't need to go viral. I didn't need to trend. I only needed to know one thing. I didn't stay silent. And that changed everything. The Gulfstream G700 lifted off with the gentleness of a breath. Its wings sliced through the wisps of cloud veiling the night sky over southern France. Below us was Domaine de Lumière, the place where, just hours ago, I was asked to leave my wedding. Now, I was flying toward freedom. Mathieu sat beside me, his eyes still carrying that stunned glow, as if the woman he had loved for 5 years had just flipped his world upside down. "Anything else I should know?" he asked, half joking, half nervous. I raised an eyebrow, took a sip of champagne, and handed him a small folded map. "Just a little property I bought recently. Don't tell me it's another island." "Nope. Kidding. It's a vineyard in Tuscany." I figured if someone ever needs a proper wedding, at least we'd have a place for it. We both laughed, and in that laughter, there was no bitterness, no sting, only understanding that we had passed through something that could have split us apart from day one. Silence in the face of injustice. I leaned my head against the window, watching clouds drift by, and thought, I didn't just marry a man. I remarried myself. After years of forgiveness, shrinking, and staying quiet, I thought of all the women who'd been humiliated in public, but smiled anyway. Those judged for the place they were born. Those who had to pretend to be poor to be loved for real. Those who had to make themselves smaller so others wouldn't feel threatened. And I wanted them to know, you don't need anyone's permission to exist. You don't need to bow to be accepted. And you certainly don't need to stay silent to be called worthy. Your value doesn't come from your business card, passport, or last name. It comes from the way you move through pain without losing yourself, the way you stay silent when it's wise, and speak when it matters. Because sometimes, the loudest act of defiance isn't a scream. It's a jet landing in the middle of your wedding to show the world you don't need recognition to be valuable. The seatbelt chime rang. We had reached cruising altitude. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of proving anything. Because from now on, I have nothing left to prove. A story of dignity, self-respect, love, and awakening. A lesson for anyone who's ever been underestimated. And a message. Sometimes, silence is a weapon. But when you choose to speak, make sure the sky listens.